Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 17 of season 4 of Babylon 5, The Face of the Enemy. Ivanova narrates as the war continues. The rebels have more Earth ships than ever before, but the battles are becoming more desperate as they near Earth. In the current engagement, Sheridan's White Star takes a hit as auto repair systems struggle to keep up. The opposing Hydra and the Delphi are out of action and withdrawing, but for some reason, despite no longer being hyperspace capable, the other forces are continuing to engage. Lita and Franklin are on Mars with their cargo. Ivanova notes their resources are stretched thin, but they should be okay if nothing goes wrong. Garibaldi confirms to Edgars that Sheridan's father is in custody and being brought to Mars. He'll act to bring Sheridan in shortly, at which point Edgars says he'll bring Garibaldi all the way in and deal with Clark and Psi Corps as they drop their guard. Then Garibaldi will know the whole truth, at which Garibaldi likens himself to Judas. As the engagement in the asteroid field continues, Sheridan's ship continues to mend itself. Finally, the captain of the Cadmus responds to Sheridan's call for surrender, saying they're dead even if they do surrender. This brings clarity. The Cadmus's crew has been told that the ships that surrender have their crew killed and replaced by Minbari. Happily, the Vesta is in the mix, and Mackie notes that the Cadmus's captain was never that bright, and all his crew are alive and well and with him. With that proof, the opposing forces finally stand down. Then another jump point opens, and the Agamemnon, Sheridan's old ship, arrives, and they're here to sign on. Sheridan immediately gives the bridge to Marcus to head across to his ship, despite Marcus very sensibly suggesting that might not necessarily be the best idea, but Sheridan trusts them implicitly. On Mars, Franklin greets Number 1, who is wary of Lita as she came through before without telling them she was a telepath, necessary at the time because she was running from Psi Corps. Number 1 is angry that Franklin didn't bring her in on this, because whilst he might trust Lita with his life, she wants to make her own decision when it comes to that. Lita offers to stay topside, but Franklin says they may need her at a moment's notice. Number 1's mood does not improve as Franklin's cargo starts arriving. More telepaths. A lot more. Sheridan's old ship is, much as he remembers it, ironically upgraded with a new tracking system, in part to help hunt him down. The crew has been following his exploits, and some had started to question whether he was out of control, but as illegal orders started to be issued, it became obvious to them that the reports of Santiago's murder were correct, so they voted to sign on. Just then a call comes in from Marcus, who has Mr. Garibaldi for Sheridan. What he tells him is basically true, and that he has a team who can get his father out, but who believe they could be being set up by Clark, so they want Sheridan and Garibaldi alone, and very soon. The Agamemnon's captain cautions Sheridan against it, but he tells Garibaldi once he has confirmation from his own sources he'll make the meeting, alone. Ivanova is less than impressed by what he's planning to do, an objection he duly notes and ignores. In his absence, he's leaving her in charge of the fleet, and Marcus will be her liaison. He tells her to use White Star 40 to get to their position as rapidly as possible. It can't be Delenn in charge. She's not back, and it's got to be a clean fight, human commanding officers only. He doesn't want anyone thinking the Minbari War is repeating itself. She still thinks it's a setup, but he says whilst he and Garibaldi haven't been getting on, he's never threatened him, and he'd never forgive himself if he didn't at least try to rescue his dad. The Agamemnon has current access codes, so it can get him into the colony's space for the meeting without issue, allowing him to take a thunderbolt down to the planet's surface. The Agamemnon sets course for beacon 119176. On Mars, Lita is being treated with zero respect, and Franklin doesn't know why. Number 1 tells him Lita knows why, and leaves him to find room for his cargo. Lita explains that it's because of Bloodhound units. Psi Corps assets assigned to the Earth military to do deep scans of anyone suspected of being a rebel, the sort of scans that can cause heart attacks and other issues. She's heard of them since coming off the rogues list. She says it's happened before when telepaths were killed, scanning without due process. One spate of murders she was involved with during her internship as a psychop resulted in a man in Beta Colony in a room in an institution who screams at things only he can see, things implanted by Teeps. He's kept straitjacketed so he can't claw his eyes out. After that, Lita transferred to commercial work. She foresees a day when normals and Teeps will be at war. Franklin hopes that's something they can work to resolve when Sheridan has overthrown Clark, at which point Number 1 passes them the information on the change of command of the fleet. Lanier and Delenn arrive back at the station just as Ivanova is heading out. She effectively puts the station under Delenn's stewardship. John takes his Thunderbolt in and approaches the bar in civilian clothes. He meets Garibaldi, who indicates they're on Mars, and that Sheridan's dad is under light guard because his capture hasn't been announced. Sheridan asks what he needs to do, and Garibaldi tells him he's already done it, then slaps a tranq patch on his hand, telling him not to fight it or he'll be hurt. Of course he tries, his vision swimming, but whilst he gives a good account of himself, the numbers are not in his favour. Garibaldi does not join or help as his former commanding officer finally hits the deck. Ivanova receives the news of his capture just after she joins Marcus on White Star 2, ISN trumpeting his capture as he continues to be beaten in shackles in his holding facility. On the station, Delenn awakens suddenly, his name on her lips just a second before Lanier arrives to tell her the news. On Mars, Edgars reports that Clark is ecstatic over Sheridan's capture, nor that Edgars cares. Garibaldi demands to know the whole truth now, and Wade begins as Edgars opens a concealed wall panel with his handprint. They explain that Clark is not the issue, he'll be gone in a few years. The Psi Core he elevated, however, that forms his power base, they're the long-term problem. Ultimately, they would enslave Homo sapiens. So inside the wall is the solution. The antidote Garibaldi got through Babylon 5, and the virus it treats, both developed by Edgars. The pathogen binds to the telepathic activation gene and is airborne, fully contagious, and fully lethal, unless you get a shot of antidote every 2 weeks. An antidote that normals will control. Miss one dose and you're dead. If telepathy is a natural advantage in evolution, the pathogen is the cheat code to re-level the playing field. Edgars trusts Lise, but couldn't with this because he knows that the Psychops would kill her within minutes once they knew, so she knew only a half-truth. Unfortunately now she knows the whole thing because she's been hiding in the room. Edgars declares himself tired and leaves, whilst Garibaldi says he's in favour of what they're trying to do. Wade tells him he can't now leave the compound as dispersal will be happening soon. When he's alone, he detaches a tooth and breaks it open to reveal a device that emits a signal. We see a transport arrive to Edgar's dome. Garibaldi boards one very quiet. Lise joins him and entreats him to help stop the plot, but he just tells her to go home. She leaves and another shadow falls over him as he sits motionless. Mr. Bester. Bester scans Garibaldi and is genuinely shocked by the scope of Edgar's intentions. He joins dots that Garibaldi wasn't aware of, understanding that whilst the shadows empowered Clark, they also feared telepaths, so probably assisted Edgars in producing his disease and the cure. Clark's ambition on one side, Edgar's fear of telepaths on the other, played to their advantage. He debates leaving the real Garibaldi trapped pounding inside his own mind, but elects to be magnanimous as he has, however involuntarily, prevented Vestas' people becoming a slave race. He encourages him to go back and remember. The Shadows abducted him because they had assessed 3 people could have replaced Sheridan, him, Ivanova and Delenn. The others would have been eliminated, so Garibaldi was taken for reconditioning by the Shadows, as we saw at the end of the previous season. Bester intervened in that psionic reconditioning and brought him to a research facility on Mars, not to be reprogrammed fully, but adjusted, his natural suspicions and stubbornness enhanced, so that with additional nudges he would do what came naturally and investigate the conspiracy, moving further from himself and more towards Bester's puppet. So now, mission accomplished, Bester contemplates putting him out of his misery, but says he isn't cruel. His own people won't believe what's happened, so he'll have nowhere to go anyway. So Bester gives him a psionic all clear. Once he's left the tube, Garibaldi will be free and able to move again and will remember all of it. And true to his word, he does just that, giving him his "be seeing you" salute, and leaves an anguished Garibaldi on the travel tube alone. Meanwhile, the fleet has confirmed the news and Marcus asks Ivanova what she wants to do. Have Garibaldi shot on sight should he return to the station, for starters. She says nothing has changed. Clark is wrong if he thinks this is going to slow them down. She says that Sheridan once told her the job is more important than a person, so they keep doing the job. The attack on Edgars is pinned on the resistance. ISN declares a day of celebration and commends that Garibaldi was involved in Sheridan's capture. So this episode really wraps up a season-long mystery, or mysteries even, because until I rewatched this, I couldn't recall why Garibaldi had been singled out by the Shadows to be taken even as they pulled back from the station. The reasoning does work very well. If you cut off a few heads, you can then put a puppet in their place to move things in the direction you want. And who better to create such a puppet than Psychor? But Bester had other plans, and once more we see how much internal influence he has and how well connected he is in the Corps to have been able to spirit Mr. Garibaldi away for his own purposes. It may well be that Shadow influence was disrupted by Mr. Morden being on Centauri Prime during the start of Season 4, which could have helped. So whilst we now fully appreciate what has been causing Garibaldi to be so out of character, the rest of the denizens of the B5 universe do not, of course. So Bester might have done him a mercy in killing him, because now all his former comrades are after him, including Ivanova, who has ordered him shot on sight should he try and return to the station. Bester might claim not to be capricious, but let's face it, he's dropping Garibaldi in it from a great height. And Michael has always had his struggles, so to have this done to him is particularly harsh. I just can't catch a break, it seems. Even more ironic is that it's his attitude that kept him safe from out-and-out Talia-style reprogramming. So there is that. Incidentally, Harlan Ellison, one of JMS's great creative co-conspirators, played the Cyclops, suggesting the reprogramming. Also note that Lisa's reported missing by ASN, so Garibaldi may still have a chance to find her. Koenig again plays Bester brilliantly, and out of the blue. So whilst he does have a lot of exposition to do, it's all very firmly in line with his character, and there's never been any love lost between him and Garibaldi, which makes the situation even worse / better. Speaking of telepaths and Edgar's hypothesis in general, we see that Lita's treatment by the Resistance is in part due to the military using telepaths in a way that we know Bester has objected to before, not wishing them to be used as cannon fodder. So Edgars was right here. Clark is clearly using them as a means to solidify his power, and in so doing Psychor's power. And Lita herself anticipates a conflict between Teeps and Normal, just as Edgars does, because information is power. And Teeps can get hold of information others cannot. So whilst Franklin, who has a record for helping telepaths of course, recognises this risk and wants to address it, Lita knows full well the depths the Cyclops can descend to in protecting their own. Okay, let's talk Sheridan. He's an idiot. Sorry, but for God's sake, man, delegate. The references to a colony being his destination was clearly intended to throw us off, because I immediately thought Mars when I saw his Thunderbolt atmosphere breaking. His replacement on the Agamemnon warns him. Ivanova warns him. They tried. He's not even hiding his face. Surely facial recognition would have been pinging him all over the place, even if Edgar's team hadn't picked him up first. It's a bit of a stretch to have him go down there, even with his dad's life at risk. But in his defence, it's his dad, and it's Garibaldi who he doesn't really have reason to believe is a clear and present danger at this point. Yet this isn't just about his dad. There's a hell of a lot more at stake, and there's Delenn to consider too. The sequence is well played, even if it seems a little unbelievable that he'd fight back so well when doped, but my headcanon for that is that Lorien's little helpers might allow him to recover a little faster from some things than would otherwise be the case. The use of strobing is clever. It's not something that's been done before, and it gives us snapshots of Sheridan and Garibaldi's faces as the action plays out that just highlights the shift in fortunes. So yes, put aside the choice, and the action and the subsequent shots of him getting pounded are very powerful. You can only hope that Edgar's assessment of Clark wanting to keep him alive is accurate. Edgar's plan is a very clever one, seemingly, but for it to succeed, you'd have to maintain absolute control over how to produce the antidote against telepaths. Interesting. Also, having Wade on Babylon 5 was a stupid idea, because there were Psycho agents in the field. He probably knew enough to blow the whole conspiracy wide open, so unless he had some method to suicide pretty rapidly, or could resist scans, he was a walking security risk for Edgar's. It does, however, explain why Edgar's has been so keen to keep to himself. Telepaths need line of sight to scan you, so if you're never seen, you can keep your secrets safe. A word on the Agamemnon. The bridges of the ships of the Omegas are clearly redresses of the same set, but a nice touch is that the ships have their own shields or emblems. The Agamemnon's is clearly visible as Sheridan tours the bridge, and there have been other examples. Clever way to pull them out as different ships whilst keeping them in the same visual style. Also note that the bridge must be somewhere on the rotating section, because they don't seem to be using Expanse style magnetic boots as they move around. Whilst I've had cause to complain about the ship renders before this episode, I have to say they were done really well here, and there are some nice profile shots of the Omegas in hyperspace and as detailed on screens on the command deck. I also like the aerobraking effect of the Thunderbolt, short-lived as it was. It feels like they'd slowed things down a touch to Season 3 levels. I also like the self-repair effect of purple mottling you see on the White Star Bridge, and the now almost casual way in which context-relevant space can be seen outside the White Star's nose from the bridge. It might be tactically unwise to have windows on the bridge, but it does show a nice attention to detail. So in terms of the pieces, we now have Sheridan, Garibaldi, Lita, Franklin, and a boatload of Teeps, deep frozen, Franklin noting they were able to get in quite easily because Clark's forces have been pulled away by the rebels, all on Mars. Plus, presumably, Sheridan's dad too, and a missing lease. Yet both Sheridan and Garibaldi are essentially compromised, so the episode isn't exactly ending on a high note for the resistance to Clark. Psychor emerges unscathed from the whole thing, despite its close call. Ivanova is now fighting for space superiority, and let's face it, you don't want to be on the receiving end of that, so there is that. And Delenn is back on the stations, so she can provide wisdom where needed. So this is a big, shiny payoff sort of episode when all's said and done. But really, it's only an appetizer because somehow, if JMS goes that way, this needs to resolve itself into an upswing in just a few episodes. Keeping all this coherent when they were clearly compacting the storylines hard at this point is remarkable, and I will take a moment to take a breath after this season and just consider exactly how many mini-arcs we've had within this one season, because it really is an incredible achievement. 5 episodes remain this season, so I'll catch you for the next, which, as I recall, I found pretty hard to watch first time round. See you for the next one.